Okay, so let's talk about the characteristics of invertebrate animals. First off, let's talk about their support system. All animals have some type of support system. In us, we have a skeletal support system because we are vertebrate animals. However, we also see that some invertebrates have what we call a hydroskeleton, which is a cavity filled with water that helps support them through water pressure pushing out, like a jellyfish. They also have an exoskeleton, like our cockroaches. These are usually a hard support system on the outside of the body. These exoskeletons can be shed. They develop from a portion of the body called the ectoderm, which we're going to learn about just in a little bit. And then we have an endoskeleton. Just kind of reviewing this, we as humans have an endoskeleton along with all other vertebrate animals. The digestive system of some of these animals is a little bit different. Invertebrates have one of two types of digestive systems. They either have an incomplete digestive system, which consists of a digestive cavity with one opening, or a complete digestive system, which has a digestive system with two openings, being usually a mouth and an anus. Now remember, simple animals like Hydra, which are just little invertebrates which live in the ocean, they will actually ingest their food through the same opening as they excrete their food from when it's a waste product. And so those are typically your incomplete. They are also your less evolved animals. The more evolved animals have what we call two openings, and that is a mouth and an anus. So food will come in and your excrement will come out another. And so an excretory system is actually developed in those that have a complete digestive system, in which they're able to get rid of these waste products. Also, we start to see that waste products are removed through a process called urination through urea. And these are your more complex invertebrates. Not all invertebrates will have that. Then we have your nervous system. Most organisms, which are invertebrates, will have a simple nervous system. The nervous system allows them to respond to senses within the environment. The simplest invertebrate nervous system is just a network of nerves that sense touch. They cannot sense typically pain, just touch. And that is called a nerve net. Most invertebrates have more complex nervous system, which may include a brain or a ganglia. A ganglia is a cluster of nerve cells that act similar to a brain. A flatworm will have a ganglia. For this process, we typically see that the more complex the organism is, the more complex their nervous system is. Such as invertebrates, we have a more complex nervous system with a large brain and a spinal cord, and then we have things like the autonomic nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. We have subdivisions of the main neural system that will allow for functionings and more sensations. Respiratory systems are used to exchange oxygen. Most animals have some type of specialized respiratory system. Maybe aquatic animals like fish, also jellyfish are able to take in oxygen through gills, or they have a tissue where they're just able to absorb the oxygen from the water. We also will see that we have evolved to include terrestrial organs, which will have a set of lungs, which will exchange our oxygen as well. Now, depending on what type of organism it is, it either has an open or closed circulatory system. A lot of times we are going to find that our simplest animals, such as invertebrates, are going to have an open circulatory system where the heart is able to pump fluid just out to the body cavity and will come back. As we start to evolve, and even in invertebrates, we will have a closed circulatory system. This is where the heart is able to pump the blood through vessels and it comes back to the heart. This portion, the blood does not come in contact with the body tissues. It stays within the system itself. But we're able to be specialized enough that we can exchange that with outside materials. Oh, and my pictures didn't show up for my open and closed circulatory systems. I apologize. You can Google search those. One is going to be of a invertebrate we know as a grasshopper, and the other is going to be of a earthworm, which we'll both dissect. Then we have reproductive. Most of your invertebrates will reproduce asexually or sexually. Typically, asexual reproduction is your invertebrates that are lower on the evolutionary totem pole. They will reproduce in things like budding, binary fusion, or we will start to see things like fragmentation, such as in starfish. However, we do know that insects, the largest of all of the invertebrates, are able to reproduce sexually. They will produce a diploid adult from haploid gametes, just like we produce them. Some of the species will be hermaphroditic, which will contain both egg and sperm. Fertilization occurs when the sperm does fuse to the egg, just like in us. And we also see that they will have a larval stage. The larvae is a juvenile or immature stage of the animal and is generally quite different from the adult form of the species, such as our juvenile stage for our cockroaches. They don't really look like cockroaches. They look like kind of white little ants hanging out everywhere, and they're kind of disgusting. And so we see that. Or you'll see like a butterfly will have a larvae stage, and they don't really look like a butterfly. They're a caterpillar. So let's look at some evolutionary trends. Okay, so invertebrates, we have evolved to develop important traits before they are able to appear. And these are some of the things. Tissue, we see the first tissue forming in a sponge. A sponge does not have organs. It does not have organ systems. It is simply made of tissue. And a sponge would be the simplest of all animals, and it is an invertebrate. We also see things like body symmetry developing. The more symmetry you have, the more evolutionary advanced you are. So tissues. Tissues we know are a cluster of cells that have a specialized function that work together. When you have different tissues working together, you form an organ and then an organ system. The more advanced you are, the more organs and organ systems you will have. Body symmetry. We have asymmetrical body symmetry, which means they do not have any piece that is similar. So if you cut them in half, they look completely different on both sides. A sponge would be an example of that. You then will have radial symmetry. Radial symmetry is kind of like taking a bowl and dividing it up. On any axis, you can have the same portion of the bowl going around the central portion or the middle. Then we have bilateral. We are bilateral, which means we are mirror images. Our eye on one side looks like the eye on the other. We have two ears that opposite of each other. And this is cephalization, where we have a concentration of nerve tissue or sensory organs that are in the anterior of the organism, which means our front of our body is able to see things like our eyes are on the front of our body or anterior. We also have our nose, our mouth. Those are a cluster of those cells. We'll also see that we have developmental stages which occur. So, early developmental stages, we know that we have a zygote, which will go through cleavage, which basically then will turn from 1 cell to 2 cells, and then from 2 to 4, and then we go to our 8-cell stage, where you now have your 4 cells going into 8. That will keep dividing until we find what we call a blastula. A blastula is basically just a hollow ball of cells. When you get a blastula formed, it will then start to go through what we call gastrulation. And this is where you have a blastule pore, which basically the ball, the hollow cell, will actually have one divot that goes into it, forming kind of a mouth or opening, and this will have what we call a hollow pocket for gastration. This will either be the mouth or the anus. And so we have some different body parts for differentiation. We have an endoderm, an ectoderm, and an endoderm. The ectoderm is the outermost layer. The endoderm will form our guts, and the mesoderm will form what we know as our skeletal or muscular system. In animals, we will have either protostomes or deuterostomes. Protostomes are those who have a blastule pore, which will form a mouth, and deuterostomes, the mouth does not derive from the blastule pore, which means the blastule pore will form the anus for this. The anus will develop opposite of the mouth in a protozome, and your simplest organisms, such as starfish and your vertebrates, are all deuterostomes. The first animal to develop an endoskeleton was a deuterostome. So we are considered deuterostomes, and most of our invertebrate friends are protostomes.